Good morning, I'm Randy Ruth, and welcome to another edition of Your Pocket Mechanic. So, a few weeks ago, I did a video on side work. That is, where a customer has his vehicle repaired by a mechanic who works in a shop, but the mechanic does it on his own time. And it's often a good deal for the customer in theory, because they are able to save money that a shop would charge, because the mechanic would charge far less to do it on his personal time. And sometimes they're able to save money on parts because the mechanic is able to get the parts at his cost. And I brought up that this seems to be a good deal for the customer who saves a lot of money, and sometimes it can be good for the mechanic as a way of making tax-free money between paydays. But I also said it's not always such a good idea and gave several scenarios of what could possibly happen. So this morning I want to share with you a story of what happened to me and why I stopped doing side work when I worked at a regular retail shop. Now this goes back to 1992, 27 years ago, when I was working at a Ford dealer. I was still a young man then, so it tells you I'm getting pretty old now. But I often took on a lot of side work after work. I worked a regular 8 to 5 shift and had side work that I would do for customers from 5 p.m. up until late in the evening or on the weekends. And it was tax-free money that we would often have, my wife and I would have, between paydays. It appears that this was a good deal, that we always had a little cash flow going. But let me explain to you what was happening during all this time. First of all, when I got off work after putting in an 8-9 hour shift, and sometimes it would be longer than that if I ended up working overtime, I'm hungry, I'm off work, I'm tired. I still had a young daughter at the time who had homework that had to be done. She often, had after school events that I ended up having to miss out on because I had side work to do. I was tired, I wanted to go to bed early, so this a lot of times left me to rushing through jobs that, I should have spent a little more time on. You also have to remember that I was doing this in my garage at home, so I'm out of the element that I'm usually working in, which is a professional shop where I have lifts, I have air tools, and all this. I'm working in my garage where, in the winter it's cold, or in the summer it's blistering hot. It's at night when most parts stores are closed, so if I need something, I have no way to get it. Like I said, I was often hungry, I was tired, I was out of the element that I'm used to working in. That didn't mean I didn't have the tools to get it done, I just didn't have that shop environment. I didn't have coworkers around me and so forth. And sometimes the lighting wasn't so hot. Now, there are mechanics who at their house do have a very suitable workspace to work in, but a lot of them don't. So, my weekends were pressed for time. I missed a lot of my daughter's softball games that she had, during the weekend. I missed a lot of things that I should have been a part of because I was doing side work. Let me also tell you something else that would happen. I would often have to take some of the customers' cars I was doing at home. I would have to take their parts to work and clean them up in the solvent tank at work, or take them apart on the bench where I had special tools. So I was cutting into the work I should have been doing during my regular working hours to do something on my side job that I'm doing at home. Not to mention, you have to sneak around and do it because you don't want the shop foreman or the service manager to know that you're not working on a customer's vehicle at the shop. No, you're working on something that's from your house. But there was an incident that happened which soured me on doing side work altogether. There was a customer I had met. I didn't really know him well. I met him through a friend of a friend who had a problem that he was taking to a transmission shop. Now, what this was, his speedometer wasn't working and his transmission wasn't shifting right. And inside this transmission, this is on a front-wheel drive car, was a gear, a plastic gear that pressed onto a shaft that drove the speedometer, but also drove part of the transmission called the governor, which tells us transmission when to shift. Now, this plastic gear had worn out. And to fix it properly, you had to take the transmission out, take it apart, and press a new one on. Well, the man didn't have the money to do this, and he found a kit. I don't know where he found it because this would have been long before internet days. He found a kit that you didn't have to take the transmission apart. You reached in through a little hole, and it was a two-piece part that clipped on with little links that buckled them together. And he asked me to put it on for him. I said, sure, no problem. And so I did the repair. I'd never seen anything like that before. I don't know, it seemed like a reasonable way to fix it. Well, I put it on for the guy, and his speedometer worked, and his transmission shifted fine. About a week later, the man calls me up and said, well, my speedometer quit working, and now my transmission's making a funny noise. So I asked him to bring it over, and I found out that little piece he had bought that I put on had fallen off and got pulled inside the transmission and chewed up. And now the transmission did have to come apart. So I told him what had happened, and he said, well, when can we do this? And I said, well, maybe I can do it on the weekend. And I told him how much it was going to cost. And he said, well, I'm not paying for it. You put it on. And I said, okay, but you supplied the part. Well, this went back and forth, and I said, well, I'm not doing this for free. And he said, well, I'm not paying for it. So it kind of became a tug of war. Well, the guy left. I didn't hear from him for a while. A couple weeks later, I get a summons to appear in small claims court. The man was suing me. Okay, he had taken it to a shop who did confirm that, yes, now the transmission has to come apart. These pieces that broke off had to be cleaned out. Well, the man was suing me to pay to have his car fixed. Well, I ended up going to small claims court, and he presented his side. And this was kind of frightening for me. I'd never been in small claims court. He presented his side on what happened, and the judge only gave me about 5 minutes to speak. And I said, well, yes, he brought it over, and I put it on, charged him $50, and that was it. Well, the small claims court, at least where I live, doesn't work on TV. They don't give you a verdict right then. They mail it to you. And so a week later, I get the verdict in the mail that I only had to pay the guy the $50 I had charged him to put the part on. That was it. I didn't have to pay anything else. And I thought that was the end of it. I didn't hear from the guy again. Well, next thing I know, I get a visit from the Bureau of Automotive Repair. I thought, wow, okay. They asked me about the job, and I told them I did it, and they weren't concerned with who was right or wrong, because since I wasn't a licensed repair facility, the guy didn't really have anything to work with. They said, do you often take money to work on vehicles at your house? And I said, yes. Well, they wrote me a ticket. I got a $150 fine for running an unauthorized repair facility. They considered working at home was an unauthorized repair facility, and that was a $150 fine. And I thought, wow, okay, that's money I wasn't counting on. And I said, well, can I pay to get a license? And they gave me the form to license my garage. So that was another $200. So I filled out the form to make my garage a licensed repair facility. And I thought, okay, good, I'm covered. If this ever happens again, I'm covered. No, it's not the end of it. Next, I get a visit from the county who said, this is not a commercial establishment. This is a residential establishment. You're not allowed to do work out of here. They issued me a cease and desist order. So now I'm out $350. The $150 for the fine and the $200 I had paid for a license to run a repair facility that I couldn't operate because I didn't live in a commercial establishment. So this ended up costing me a lot of money. This also cost me a relationship with what could have been a good customer, because actually the guy was a very nice guy, and perhaps he did feel he was in the right. He did pay me to do something that didn't work out well. I blamed it on the part. It could have, he didn't know if I put it on wrong. It ended badly for both of us. This was bad for the consumer, because had this been a regular repair shop, he might have been able to get some kind of reimbursement. I don't know. But this ended badly for me. It ended bad for the customer, and that was the end of me doing side work. Now, some people, like I said, some mechanics do have a good establishment to work in at their house, and customers feel comfortable taking their cars there. That's fine. If you're a customer and you're comfortable with that, that's fine. If you're a mechanic and you feel like taking that risk, that's fine. I personally would never do side work again. I would not ever encourage anybody to do it. But for those who feel comfortable with it, and for the customers that feel comfortable with it, that's a good deal. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you, and that's an example of what can happen to both the consumer and the mechanic if you choose to do side work. So there you have it. I'm Randy Ruth, and thank you for watching Your Pocket Mechanic.